And yeah, I didn't really think of myself as a YouTuber. Um, I could still remember like one of my students kind of like jokingly posted on Facebook like, "Hey, my professor is a YouTuber now."
Hey everyone, welcome. Today I'm going to be interviewing Data Professor from YouTube and we're going to learn more about him. So, welcome Chanin, how are you?
Great, yeah, it's a pleasure being on your podcast.
It's great to have you here. So, before we get into your YouTube channel and what you do right now, I want to learn about your background. So, can you introduce yourself a little bit? What is your educational background?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so my educational background, well, it began in um, undergraduate. I have a bachelor's of science in biology with a pre-med concentration. Shortly after graduating, I
Mhm.
joined a PhD program in medical technology, where I did initially experimental biology work into tissue engineering, protein engineering, and then later on picked up computational biology, computational chemistry, data mining, and machine learning. And then afterward, I did some
Awesome.
postdoctoral training at various university like Lund University and also at Uppsala University. And yeah,
And then you became a professor.
and then yeah, I became a lecturer first, and then assistant professor, and then an associate professor, and yeah, and like just before leaving the university, I applied for the professorship, and the envelope for decision whether being a full professor or not actually came in at the moment that I resigned. So I left the
Oh,
envelope unopened, so I don't know what's the story there.
I see. But at least you were really close to being a full professor. So the name data professor is not just a random name. You
Right,
you are actually a qualified person in this area. And you mentioned computational chemistry, right? Computational
right.
biology.
Mhm.
How is it different than normal biology?
Yeah, like computational biology is more or less like you're using um, algorithms to design RNA or to design DNA primer, like the nucleic acid that is used to amplify DNA. Um,
Hmm.
so it's using computational calculation, like particular nucleic acid would have a certain melting temperature, and then all of these will be like added um, and then you get the temperature that is optimal for like annealing or like into when you're doing the amplification. In terms
So
of
is it
yeah,
kind of like simulations sort of thing?
well, it could be computation, just like a calculator.
Hmm.
Yeah, like you have
Yeah.
a particular equation, and then you could just use,
Hmm.
for example, you could use Python to do the calculation.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, that's interesting. And is there any machine learning part to that part of your background too?
Yeah, so I picked that up when I was analyzing a data set of proteins, like green fluorescent proteins. And yeah, we
Hmm.
were the first to actually apply machine learning to green fluorescent proteins back in 2000, I think 2005 or 2006, which we
Hmm.
published back in the days.
Oh, that's really cool. So you were one of the first people, well, you were the first person to take this approach to the problem that you were working on.
Right.
And then you started with your YouTube channel. Was that around the same time or was it
No, that
later?
was way later. So 2005 was when like I was doing my PhD, which began in 2002, and then in 2006 I
Hmm.
completed my PhD, and then I joined as a lecturer at the university, and then I started my YouTube channel in 13 years later in 2019.
Oh, I see. So you had like a whole academic career and then you decided to make the switch to a YouTube for now at least. And
Right,
what made you interested in data science enough to build a YouTube channel around it?
right. Yeah, so like when I was mentoring students at the university for their master's or undergraduate or PhD projects. Um, One of the recurring question was that like for every year there would be like similar questions. New students would ask similar questions. They would undergo similar problems, and so like an idea clicked. Like why don't I just kind of like answer for future students? Like if there's
Mm-hmm.
video versions of question like FAQ that could potentially be viewed by future students, then the effort of like repetitively answering the same questions could then be directed toward answering more complicated questions. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that led to like a domino effect, and then yeah, into a full blown YouTube channel.
Awesome. So, but then you did not actually start with the intention of, oh, I want to build a hit YouTube channel where I talk about data science or machine learning.
No, actually, it was just kind of
But,
like I just wanted to experiment, wanted to see how it is to like teach online.
mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, it was just an experiment back in the days.
I see. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I guess back then, the pandemic hasn't happened yet. So we did not really have that much teaching online going on. Maybe on YouTube, there were some channels teaching people, but I guess at least in schools, we
Mhm.
did not really have that remote teaching happening so much. So it's definitely, you're probably one of the first, like earliest experimenters of this, which is super cool. And are you still active academically? Do you still work in the bioinformatics field or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so answering whether I'm still active in bioinformatics. Well, there were some projects that I accepted prior to resigning. Like for example, a book chapter that I promised to
Mhm.
contribute to one of the um, books published by Elsevier, which is a company based in Amsterdam. Um, and yeah, so
Mhm.
I have um, some writing to do. There are some other collaborative research projects that I'm helping to finalize for PhD students, and also a former postdoctoral fellow that I supervised
Mhm.
when I was in the university. Yeah. So other than that, there's no new projects. Just kind of like completing
Mhm.
the old ones.
Yeah, I see. So just tying up some loose ends, and then
Exactly.
you're going to be done with that chapter of your life and fully focus on YouTube for now. And just to learn more about your YouTube journey. So, how long has it been since you started?
Yeah, so you briefly mentioned about the pandemic. So the pandemic happened in 2019, around like toward the end of the year, December. I released the first video on August back in 2019. So it was about like 3 to 4 months before the pandemic. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so at the time, yeah, you also asked like how what motivated me to start the channel, and actually the big motivator was my daughter, with the question of why don't you create a YouTube channel, and then so that led
Mm-hmm.
like one thought to the other, and then actually buying a camera, and procrastinating for like a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, buying some camera gears and a Blue Yeti
Mm-hmm.
microphone. Yeah, so the channel could have started earlier, maybe at the beginning of 2019. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that, like about 4 to 5 videos in, the pandemic happened, and then I started to notice like an upsurge of video views on YouTube.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and also there were some other data science YouTuber like Kenji. He reached out
Mm-hmm.
for a collaboration on a video that I've made for his channel about like how to build a portfolio website using Hugo.
Mm-hmm.
And then yeah, that brought in additional subscribers to the YouTube channel. Um, and yeah, I didn't really think of myself as a YouTuber. Um, I could still remember like one of my student kind of like jokingly posted on Facebook like, "Hey, my professor is a YouTuber now," And yeah, it used to be a bit like, like a bit shy, like, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then yeah, and then like afterwards, like, back to like collaborations. Yeah, and then I gathered the courage to reach out to other content creators, and then do more
Mm-hmm.
collaborations, podcasts, and yeah, reaching out to researchers like Pat Walters to do a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He's an expert in chem informatic, and also at the
Mm-hmm.
interface of machine learning. And yeah, and so
I see.
yeah, and eventually had a collaboration with Joe Matek, creating a video for his other YouTube channel, Data IQ, Recall by
Mm-hmm.
Data IQ. And yeah, it was a pretty fun journey in this short, packed 3 years so far.
Awesome. Yeah, and it sounds like the main driver was, I guess, the pandemic and the fact that a lot of people started learning online and also collaborations. But it also seems like, at least seems to me, that it would have helped to have a teaching experience, right, for that many years. 13, you said, I guess.
15 now.
And yeah, and then 15, yeah. So now you have 15 years of experience in teaching people, and now the last couple of years also teaching online. So I'm sure that also makes a difference, rather than just someone who was an expert in the field but maybe is not as good as explaining things as you.
Oh, well, yeah, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, I certainly think that having some teaching experience would definitely help in being a content creator. Like actually, like a couple of years ago, like maybe 5 or 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
the university where I worked at previously in Thailand wanted to encourage professors to teach online, like create like online videos, or at least pre-recorded video for teaching. Like it could also be like animated videos, but then a lot
Right.
of the professors were quite, like afraid um, of doing that. And particularly, I think it's because they have no experience like recording in front of a camera,
Mm-hmm.
creating, animation, or um, screencast, like all of those are quite foreign to them. But then like the pandemic hit, and everyone was forced to teach online anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so it's kind of like, yeah, we content creators have like a early, what do you call it, an early advantage, where we
Mm-hmm.
experimented for a while, and then when it actually came the time where everyone was forced to teach online, then yeah, we had the tools, we had the know-how to proceed further. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think like the situation of the world is kind of like it forces the professors to adapt, and
Mm-hmm.
then yeah, they had to be content creators, like unwillingly, I guess. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, I think the world is moving toward that direction, where online education, I mean, with no borders, is the future. And
Yeah.
like before, you would have to physically travel to a campus in order to receive like education, or do internship.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, there are, other than online videos for teaching, online educational program like a full bachelor's or master's or PhD
Yeah.
degree. There are also like this platform for doing internship as well, like a virtual internship.
Mm-hmm.
And even now we have this remote work. Yeah, so it's opening up many doors. And yeah, I think YouTube is a prominent place for free education. Like aside from data science, you could learn anything.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm also really curious to see what we're going to see in the coming 5 to 10 years in terms of how this like remote learning, remote working is going to bring to our lives. Because like always been interested in remote work, but before the pandemic, it was not really possible. There were not that many possibilities, and even the opportunities were not as good. But I feel like with every passing day, we're seeing like more and more opportunities there. That's going to be very interesting. But that brings me actually to the fact that you also are a content creator or developer educator, right? For Streamlit or now Snowflake. So how did that happen?
Yeah, so it actually kind of like happened by chance. Um, yeah, like before actually joining Streamlit, I created like one of the early videos on my channel, like Streamlit tutorial, like how to build a
Hmm.
data app using Streamlit. And then that led to like a playlist of now about 44 videos on the
Hmm.
channel, and also some
About
blog
Streamlit only.
posts about Streamlit. Yeah, like a playlist
Wow.
of
Okay.
Streamlit videos. Yeah,
All right.
one by one. Yeah, and yeah, and then like I saw on Stack Overflow, like on the panel, there's like job openings when I was
Hmm.
a professor, and then I kind of take a peek at like some of the open positions, and then back then it was like only a few remote work in software engineering or
Hmm.
related to what I'm doing. I mean, like there's not a lot of positions that's related to what I was doing. Before I was looking into like remote like researcher position or professor position that, but then there were nothing about that. And then yeah, after like 2 to 3 years, I revisited the same thought about remote work, and then it seemed
Hmm.
to have a lot more openings. Particularly, I guess it's part of um, the effects of the pandemic. Companies are
Hmm.
going remote, and therefore there were more openings. And yeah, I saw an opening from Streamlit, and then I went to Twitter. I see some of the um, Twitter friends, like who were a YouTuber joining tech company as a developer
Hmm.
advocate, and I was thinking to myself, what if I do the same, transition? Um,
Hmm.
but then I have a family, right? So it's like not only myself, but then I have to be sure that the transition from academia to tech and also remotely
Hmm.
would work. Yeah, so I spent about 1 to 2 months, like figuring out the possibility of that, and then
Hmm.
yeah, and then reaching out to the company, and then here we are today.
Nice. Yeah. So basically, I think this is a question a lot of people have when they want to get into content creation or being a developer advocate in a company. As apart from the financial questions, also, is that going to satisfy me? Because to become a technical content creator, you also have to be a technical person. So you're either a data scientist, software engineer, machine learning engineer, etc. In your case, you were a researcher. And how did you find that switch? Do you still feel like you're learning every day and the job satisfies you and challenges you, or not?
Right. Yeah, so I myself, I'm not a computer scientist. I don't have a tech background. My undergraduate is in biology, and so I self-taught myself programming, particularly Python and R.
Hmm.
I failed at learning C++. I failed at learning Java. But then, yeah, like, having persistence and, like trying to apply Python or R to solve biological problems eventually led me to breaking into programming. And
Hmm.
in terms of learning, I find great satisfaction in learning new topics, new tools, in tech, new Python libraries to explore
Hmm.
and to use. Um, yeah, like as mentioned, like I think I like to tinker with these tools and I like to build. So, yeah, being a developer advocate, you get to build apps, you get to talk about it, you get to write about it, you get to record, like tutorial videos. So it's essentially
Hmm.
like the same task or similar skill set as a YouTuber. So yeah, I don't know why, but then it's like it kind of translate um, the
Hmm.
skill sets to becoming a developer advocate. And also, strangely, my prior experience as a professor at the university, like teaching or doing research grant writing for research project. Also translate to blog, like writing blogs, but then less technical. How can you communicate to a wider audience?
Yeah.
Um, but the only foreign thing is, I think, so it's like the skill set is coming from different profession. Blogs, writing, as a developer advocate, I think probably came from my experience as a researcher, as a professor, because we have to write a lot of research papers, research grant. In terms of content creation, like video creation, tutorials, so that came from YouTube.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah,
So you basically have been using your overall skills that you learned from everywhere. And I think at the end
here
of the
and
day,
there.
it's
Yep.
it's a lot about communicating, right? It's a lot about communicating
Hmm.
complex ideas and theories and algorithms to an audience that might not have that much experience, at least not as much as you. And I mean, you seem to be doing it greatly, as we also see of the amount of growth that you see in your channel, which is amazing to see. And so now you have your YouTube channel, your personal YouTube channel. You're a developer advocate for Snowflake and for Streamlit specifically, and you have some loose ends that you're tying with bioinformatics fields academically. But what is your plan for the future, especially for your channel? Where do you see yourself? I mean, that's a lame question, but not in 5 years, but in the
Right.
future somewhere. Where do you want to go with your channel?
Okay. That's a great question. I haven't really thought about that. Um, well, I guess continuing creating free tutorial videos on YouTube. Probably I would like to, aside from only being a content creator, I would love to write books. Probably, like, yeah, I think it's one of the dreams to have a O'Reilly book. Yeah, so yeah, I hope to explore more into that domain. Um, yeah, in terms of YouTube, I guess create more videos, grow the channel some more so that the tutorial video could reach a wider audience. Perhaps create a Thai version for the YouTube channel. Not sure, but yeah, that would be worth experimenting with. So like data science for in Thai language. Yeah. Mhm.
Are there any channels like that right now? Data science in
Well, I
Thai?
think it's not so many. I see only a few, like 2 to 3, but then they're purely from academic professors. Yeah, so it would be cool to explore from the perspective of a tech.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I also thought about making Turkish versions of my videos too, but then I always get conflicted because in which language am I going to say the terms that we
Mhm.
use? I don't even know. I'm not sure if I know how to say machine learning in Turkish. I would just say machine learning. So it's always a bit tricky, right? Then if I'm going to say
Right,
all the phrases in English, then why am I doing it in Turkish to begin with? So that's
right.
it's always tricky when you're bilingual. And one of the last things that I want to ask you is, you've been working on your YouTube channel for a while now. You're getting comments from people. You're interacting with the community. And what is your go-to advice that you give to people when they tell you that they want to become data scientists?
Right. Um, Go to advice. Well, I guess it's kind of like there's no clear path to becoming a data scientist. Whether you're coming from a technical background or a non-technical background, like economics, finance, or biology. Well, I've created a mind map. Let me get that.
I think I've seen it on Twitter, that mind map. I think it's
Right.
famous. Yes.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, this was shared on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I guess the cumulative number of engagement is probably exceeding 10,000 on all platforms. Yeah, and sometimes I would share the same infographic. So you could see that it was drawn in February of
Oh
2020,
wow.
and so I haven't really updated this yet. Yeah, so a lot of people are suggesting like components to add to the map, and I certainly agree. There's a lot of room to explore in this. Probably might make a new version of this.
Right. And is there a place where people can go and see this?
Right. So I have it shared on GitHub. So I probably could send over the link, and you could also include in the video description as well.
Right. All right. So if you want to get that infographic, people, you can go to the link in the description. And last question I have for you. I'm curious about your favorite tech stack, basically the favorite language, the favorite tool that you use, or the favorite libraries that you use to build your projects.
Cool. Yeah. So if you asked me like 3 years ago when I started my YouTube channel, I probably would say R, because back in the days there there was no Streamlit, right? There was Shiny, and so yeah, like a long story is like before I learned Python, and then I switched to R because there was Shiny, and then I switched back to Python because there was Streamlit, and that the subscribers of the channel requested for more Python tutorials because in the early video content of my channel, if you would go back and check, yeah, a lot of the comments were like, "Why don't you create tutorials using Python?" And so and then I waited for like completing the series of R tutorials, and then
Yeah.
made the transition to creating tutorials using Python, which has been long standing for the past 2.5 years. And I'm a bit rusty in R now. Yeah, so my tech stack would be programming language is Python, and the IDE that I'm using is VS Code and also Atom, which seems to be deprecating or discontinued
Oh.
from GitHub. Yeah, and also on the cloud, just using GitHub, just editing the code file, and then yeah, the code is pushed into the Streamlit app automatically, and yeah, so that allows me the flexibility of working on an iPad or on an iPhone while on the travel.
Wow. So you're even coding on your iPhone, on your iPad while you're traveling.
I sometimes like make some small edits, typo,
I see.
or
Oh,
or
right,
just
right, right. Okay.
experimenting.
Yeah, I feel
Not
like
heavy
the
coding.
phone could be a little bit too small to
Exactly.
debug things.
Yeah. Exactly.
Awesome. I want to ask you one of the questions that we got from our audience, also on Twitter. Someone
Mhm.
asked you, how can you keep up with good overall morale and maintain such a high enthusiasm whilst carrying out so many projects concurrently and learning new things?
Okay, that's a great question. So I haven't really mastered that yet, and I know that in tech, burnout is a real thing, and I'm not sure if burnout is a feeling where you get like unmotivated to do things. Sometimes I would feel that, like being lazy, even to record tutorial videos on YouTube. It's still a challenge for me, like working a full time job and then at night, like doing content creation, recording tutorials, and then editing late in the night, and then work full time job and manage family life. I have a daughter, so spending time with family, and so yeah, a lot of things to handle, and I work by the clock, so it's like content creation strictly from this time to this time. This time to this time is family time, and yeah, so or also like sending my daughter off to school, picking her up from school, and yeah, everything is like based on this schedule, and yeah, so I guess the schedule helps to kind of like restrict like the focus, like okay, within this time frame should be able to get some work done.
I see. Yeah, I mean, everyone can make that plan, but it's also important to be able to stick to that plan and be disciplined enough to get yourself to like sit down on your desk and do the editing when you just want to watch TV, right?
Right, right. Like YK, the creator of CS Dojo, another YouTuber in tech, he mentioned that if you spend like 2 minutes to do some task, and then if you decide that and then you could decide later whether you want to continue doing it or you could quit. So investing 2 minutes on doing a task that you might feel lazy to do is a good start.
Yeah. And I feel like also sometimes if you just give yourself that 2 minutes and at the end of that 2 minutes, you're probably already invested
Exactly.
anyways. You'll probably just get it
Exactly.
down now that you loaded everything in your brain.
Right.
Nice. Chanin, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and answering my questions. It was really awesome talking to you.
Yep, likewise, and thanks for having me here.